This may sound a little hyperbolic, but kind of a game changer just because I don't think about it anymore. It was like enough friction to make me not do it every time. And I think what I've been finding with this is it's so much easier because I can just kind of hooked up to Telegram. So I can just say, hey, I'm having the same thing I had for breakfast yesterday, or, same lunch as yesterday, and it will just do it. It's so fast that you just don't think about it anymore. It's been pretty amazing because what you can do is you can just tell it what you had. You can take a picture, a barcode, really anything. It's worked better than pretty much anything else I've ever used because there's something so amazing about having that reasoning layer above. One time I told it what I had and it came up with the calories and everything. I was asking it like how it figured that out and it outlined its logic and it was like 10 steps.
What's up, Greg? Okay, so we were talking about a bunch of stuff on X, I think, around just updating, tracking health stuff, and then throwing agents at it and just improving just everyday life with agents. Just to start off, like, how are you using agents or personal AI in your everyday life?
Oh yeah. So I do think that probably over the past 3 months, there's been a pretty big change to what I've been doing there. I would track everything manually, and then I would use, different calorie tools like chronometer, pedometer plus to track steps, things like that. And I remember one day I was trying to figure out what would happen if I use like a Hermes agent, and what if I had access to a tool that just happened to be like an API. So I built like a nutrition tracker API, and then I used Matt, who you had on, I think last week. Love that episode, by the way. He created printing press, which you were talking about last week. I used printing press with a Hermes skill to print CLI for it. And it's been pretty amazing because what you can do is you can just tell it what you had. You can take a picture, a barcode, really anything. It's worked better than pretty much anything else I've ever used because there's something so amazing about having that reasoning layer above, kind of the tool that does the accounting, if you will, because it can do things that you would have to do, on your own that are kind of a little bit of a pain. So that's been working, really, really well because you can just take a picture.
In terms of the database, you created a database first of like different foods, or you tapped into a database?
So I tapped into a database. One is the USDA. And then there's another service, I can get it to you for the chart notes that I used as well, that they were tracking basically like barcodes, but it's an open API. And so those two things together was what I used for the database. And then, did a pre-fill on it. It's actually open source. If you go to my GitHub, it's just called Nutrition Tracker if anyone's interested. But yeah, that's what I do for the data side. And then just made a really simple REST API on top of that to add basically a dish, look it up, search, see what you had yesterday. And then, just the CLI and skill on top of that. And it works exceptionally well.
So I'm going to have to try that out because I've used Chronometer and I've used a bunch of other ones. And so it's still there. You still have to go somewhere else. And I still felt like a lot of drop down menus and trying to navigate that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I ran into as well. And it's not like it was ever too much friction, but it was like enough friction to make me not do it every time. And I think what I've been finding with this is it's so much easier because I can just kind of hooked up to Telegram. So I can just say, hey, I'm having the same thing I had for breakfast yesterday, or, same lunch as yesterday, and it will just do it. So it's so fast that you just don't think about it anymore.
Nice.
And then integrated my steps into it, steps and then weight readings. So it has APIs for those two.
Where is it pulling your steps from?
It's really hacky, but I have the automations running on the iPhone. And so they'll run every hour and I'll pull my steps from Apple Health. And then it will call the steps API directly and give it an update. And then the other thing that I really like about Hermes agent is it has built-in cron. And so I'll have it check in with me 3 times a day or 4 times a day, I guess. And then just remind me to log different things and then tell me where I am steps. And, if I'm like behind where I should be, it'll be like, hey, you really need to like take a break now and go do some walking. So it's been pretty nice to have it. It's kind of been, this may sound a little hyperbolic, but kind of a game changer just because I don't think about it anymore.
Amazing. So it just becomes like naturally in your flow because you're just getting like a nudge that's pretty
Yeah,
lightweight.
just like
that allows you
super
to
lightweight, just a nudge. And then because I typically have kind of the same things to eat, it's just so easy. It's like what I had yesterday, or here's a picture of the barcode. And then the reasoning is just really nice on it because it will take, I can't remember exactly what it was, but one time I told it what I had and it came up with the calories and everything. I was asking it like how it figured that out and it outlined its logic and it was like 10 steps. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. I would have thought of doing it that way. So it can turn, vague things into things that are pretty close to accurate.
Nice. I'll connect it and let you know. I'm on the step game this month. I started in August and I remember inspired by your step game, your public step game. I don't know if you're still public about the amount of steps you're getting, but
I should post more on that.
yeah,
But yeah.
I'm on the 15,000 these days.
Oh, nice.
And my body's like, oh man, I need new sneakers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But good problems to have.
Those are,
on-
champagne problems for sure.
on day 11.
As an aside, this doesn't have to do with AI, but there's just this paper that came out yesterday and it was a accelerometer study and they were looking at people who like exercise the most. And it was like between 510 and 610 minutes, it was like a 30% risk reduction. So it really does make a big difference. And even just like, walking, lower level movement can really, really make a big difference.
Yeah. I haven't figured out how to do recordings and walk at the same time, but mainly when I'm not in meetings and stuff, I'm on my walking pad or trying to get outside and
Oh, that's
steps.
amazing.
But yeah, so I think that the idea is like, creating things that are more or just seamless, feel like natural. And so it kind of makes it really easy for you to sort of adopt. Are there other things like that you've kind of, don't even think about that you've set up that you really benefit from these days?
Gosh, I try to keep things just really simple. And I feel like my tendency, this may sound really funny, but I think my tendency is if something is complicated, try to eliminate it rather than like automate it. And then beyond that, I just try to carve out a ton of white space or just creating. And then, obviously like walking. But
you were saying earlier when we were chatting that you do a lot of research now and you find that using kind of personal AI for different research, you had referenced a research paper, or just conducting more research in everyday activities has become like your go-to.
yeah,
Kind of like expand more of that.
yeah, absolutely. So I think, one thing that I find so interesting about health in general is there's almost never a simple answer to even like a simple question that you would think would have an answer. And I would say like, even if it seems like it has a lot of research behind it. And so one thing that I think is incredibly powerful about AI is, we never used to be able to personally read 54 papers in one sitting. That would take days or weeks. What I think changes with AI is you no longer have that same constraint to the same, ability. I'll give you like one example. So I remember there was a lot of discussion on which would be better. Would it be standard time or would it be daylight savings time? And I think this also illustrates how information kind of gets spread through health. But it seems like an obvious answer because most of the experts will kind of side on we should have standard time because it's more morning light and things like that. And also, this particular academy, recommended, all the sleep experts got together and they recommended this. And so a lot of people just take that and run with it. But one thing that I did, and this is just like one example, this isn't trying to call anyone out, but it's more illustrative about like how complicated science is but there was a sleep organization and they came out with that recommendation. They had a position paper with it. And in there, they referenced 54 papers. So I thought, this is like perfect application for AI, because what you can do is just have it go through one paper at a time. So map the claim that they're making, map the citation. The citation will link to a paper, and then you can read that paper and see if the data backs up that claim. And so what I discovered when I was going through this is the first thing was, the question they were trying to answer, 54 papers seems like a lot, but if you just did a simple classification of them, like most of the papers, I think it was around 48, had nothing to do with which time zone was better. 6 of them even kind of got close to answering that question. And then one of them was, and this is another great example. So the closest one that I could find that was done in the United States was actually, it was a brilliant study. It was cities that were bordering each other that happened to be on different time zones. And so this, on the surface, it looked legit, but I just kept interrogating and interrogating it and interrogating it. And if you looked at the averages, it seemed like those that were on standard time, like east of the time border, had better health outcomes. But what I had to do was have it find those pairs because the data wasn't published. So I wrote a program that found to the pairs. And then I had to pull income levels for all of those pairs. And so the average made it look like it was like totally legit. But when you looked at the pairs individually by reconstructing it, what you found was that it was most likely like income, and like the time zone had nothing to do with it, because there were these pairs where the income on the west side of the border was like 40% different.
Wow.
So it allows you to do things like that, but there would just be no way to do that without a team. I think it's like amazing at that, because you can not only form an opinion, but you can outline specifically why you say that. And you can be like almost as familiar with the research as, or sometimes in some cases, even more familiar than some of the experts.
Oh, fascinating. The other, it reminds me of like previous episode, it hasn't been published yet, but this guy, Blake Eastman, he had said that he doesn't trust any research studies that the agents or the LLMs kind of come up with. He has his own database that he pulls from. And then like you, he will then create his own abstract, create his own research on top of the papers to try to actually see the sources and understand if he would come to the same conclusion.
Oh, that's really smart.
As the paper, because there's also that study that like, trying to recreate studies like 50% of the time, any paper kind of fails.
Yeah.
To be recreated. And so, just now we have the ability where, he referred to it as he used to run a bunch of interns to do this type of research, for in academia. And now he just has his own sort of system in place. And so I feel like as we start more sort of people come online to this type of, computing, like, framing of data, hopefully we could get to better outcomes or just cleaner data sources that are kind of rigorously analyzed. But 2, you have more people connected to willing to like share that type of data. Like in the study, you built out your own system of tracking your data. Like I'm sure you would happily share that data with a greater pool to like have these like studies done of like, how is walking affecting your sleep, or how is, anything else affecting your everyday life. Like we still feels like the early innings of like connected devices.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. And so anyway, I'm super jazzed about this front, like, and just figure out. So did you come to a conclusion? Like, are you in camp daylight savings time?
The answer that I came to was actually, it was like pretty nuanced. So it was basically like, if you basically look at like daytime hours across the entire year and you do it by latitude, so under the 34th parallel, it doesn't really matter at all, because there's not going to be a difference in your morning light. Above the 34th parallel, that's when it has a pretty big difference. And what I actually think might be the best is to keep the time changes like just keep them because but once you get into Seattle, there's like no good real compromise. It's either, the sun doesn't come up until like almost 9 in the winter if you're on standard time. Or if you do like standard time, then you get the dark mornings in the winter. If you do standard time, then you get like really, really early light in the summer. So probably for like certain northern latitudes, you probably keep it the same. But then a lot of the data that we do have is really around the time changes. And there are two things there. It's like there's a big spike of heart attacks, but when you normalize those out, I think what you find is the total amount that were going to occur that were just going to happen anyway. And what we're seeing is kind of the ripple effects of this event happening with 350 million people all at once. But it doesn't really change the number of heart attacks. I think it just has them occur roughly the same time, just increases the peak of when they would occur. The other thing that I do think that is very much preventable is it does seem to cause more car accidents. I think that's just from people being sleep deprived. So that one you can't really, those probably weren't going to occur. So that would be like the trade-off, I think, of like keeping those is like, compare that with like a public message that tells people, hey, like maybe don't drive if you don't have to.
Go to sleep early.
Go to sleep early. Yeah. Don't drive if you don't have to, maybe for a couple days and see if you can get those deaths down. Otherwise, there doesn't appear to be like a benefit to either. In fact, above a certain parallel, it's probably just like bad to stick to either one.
Fascinating. That's super wild. I don't really have more to say on that topic. But in terms of health stuff, like just across the board, I think we were also talking about how right now you can use AI or personal AI, local AI for health data that before people might not be comfortable with, or legally, like in the US with like HIPAA and stuff, like you can't really easily send over, personal information across the wire to APIs unless you sign large contracts, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So can you share more about your experience with that?
Yeah. So I think there are kind of probably two arguments. I think there's some people that say, hey, look, if you are sharing your personal health data, you're taking a really big risk because you don't know how that's later going to be used. Is that somehow going to be sold to insurance companies? You don't really know how it's going to be used. So I think there are some people who caution of just sharing your personal data at all, health data with models. Of course, that's all personal risk preference. But then there's also health laws. So for, even outside of that, if you're like a health clinic or something like that, can you send it over the wire? The answer to that is no, unless you have like a signed, what they call it a BAA, business associate agreement. And then oftentimes those come with commit spends and things like that. But then there's also, you kind of run into the same problem because once it gets over there, even with a BAA, you may not be entirely sure how that's used. So I started using Gemma 4 locally, have it running on just like an NVIDIA AGX Orin. And so it has like 64 gigabytes of shared RAM. And that's been working really well. That particular device was kind of like more built for computer vision and used in like robotics dev kits, things like that. The RAM speed is not that great. It wouldn't be my first choice, but it's also like 40 watts of power. So that's what I liked about it. It's like I'll take slow and steady for a pretty good power profile.
And are you using it for what kind of information? It's not necessarily real-time information that you need. So how are you using it?
So I've been using it in a lot of different ways. One is with embeddings. And so I'll use it for embeddings in its clinics that I'm helping with for like voice recordings or chart notes. It's all stored securely on the server, encrypted by everything like that. But embeddings are really nice because you can look at all the communication with the patient and you can use the embeddings to search. So that's been like really helpful. And then classification as well. So you can look at just different classifying. And then why I did it in the first place, this may be the funniest thing, but HIPAA, there are a lot of, weird laws about, or I shouldn't say weird because it makes sense why they're in place. It's very sensitive data. You want to sort securely. but around like recordings. So call recordings, or if they're in the room with a patient dictating, you want to make sure that that's all secure. So I've been using Whisper a lot as well. Whisper is actually
And
one model
to do
to
that locally.
transcribe. Yeah,
Yep.
transcribe. And then you can use a local embedding model to embed that and store it locally. That's been pretty nice. I will say, like Whisper large just rips on my Orin. It works so well. That's one thing that
Nice.
it does really well.
That's awesome. So that's kind of for the clinic that you built out. And are you kind of doing any local inference on your own stuff? Or are you mainly using third parties?
Not as much. I've just been for my own stuff. I'll just use like third party. It's a little easier. And then I want to make sure that all that hardware is just like, secured, partitioned off. So it's only used for that clinic.
Nice. And then in terms of, so you're building that out, and then you are also working on a startup right now. And so on your own startup, are you using any like AI or in building that out?
Yeah. So the startup that I'm working on it's called the company name Scribble. And it's for outside sales. And one thing that I did previously in my career was work for a company called Outreach, and they were doing a lot of outbound sales. At the time when I was there, it was mostly a tool for SDRs for outbound sales. I remember at the time we were sitting there, we were thinking, what other sales personas could we go after? And outside sales is huge. You have like medical sales, food and beverage. So much of sales is still just like in your car. At the time, I remember that we decided that we didn't really think that we could build a really good product for people, because like what are they going to do? Like flip up on their laptop while they're driving down the highway. So one thing that has really changed is, being able to have voice and be able to program voice. I think that it really creates a different interface for positions like outside sales. So yeah, we use AI extensively with that. We use for the speech to text models, speech. We have a small little classifier in there that can determine if it's a relevant question or not a relevant question, or kind of a statement that they're doing. Tool use is all kind of custom in there, just so that it can be like really fast for their calendar appointments, for their mail, for different internal tools that they might use, whether that be like a CRM or things like that. So that's been pretty good. But I think what I think is really great about it is just like that, it's exposing kind of this interface that you never really had before, where it's not just for transcription or recording, just to keep track of something. You could actually do work with it while you're on the road. You update your CRM while you get in your car and drive, or actually have it take actions. So I think that's just a really nice change for the user, be able to build stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah. I remember one of the experiments I ran was being able to check your email from your phone, just like talking to it. And it's such a nice experience, because also you don't mind the latency.
Right.
Because, doing something
Doing
else.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's pretty great, but I haven't driven in a while, and then I sort of stopped working on that project. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense for building kind of voice first experiences for people who are on the road and on the go, that don't have time to fill out forms and stuff. Like the computers can fill it out for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes the forms can be pretty cumbersome for salespeople. I remember I noticed this when I was at Outreach. I asked one of our account executives, "Hey, you want to go to lunch today?" And he was like, "Yeah, hold on. I just got off this call and I have to put something into Salesforce." And I remember waiting like 8 or 9 minutes, like, "Hey, buddy, are you done?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm like on the final screen." So sometimes, they can be pretty cumbersome, just because, there's like a lot of detail that you have to capture in order to run, effective sales organization.
Yeah.
One thing that AI can really help with is summarizing a meeting, extracting different things from that, and helping you do those things without going through 12 screens.
Yeah, very much so. And like gets rid of the screens entirely. And then
Yeah, exactly.
we'll start seeing interfaces where, you know, it can kind of double click on stuff if you didn't fill out enough information. It can ask follow-up questions. So it's not necessarily just these static inputs, but it feels more interactive. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly. And I think being able to just have this flexibility where it doesn't have to be perfectly exact. It can kind of infer things and ask you just really, really nice.
Yeah.
Give you instructions too, because we'll know how to use all the software.
Right. Because there's, I think the thing that people don't realize is that you don't have to keep all that stuff in your head. The machine kind of has that recorded in its data set somewhere.
Yeah,
So can know exactly all the sort of edge cases and all the different things that need to be done.
yeah, that's right. So it really is pretty amazing. Such a different way to be creating software. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what's crazy is that it changes every week. Like we were in sort of trying to figure out how do you adapt your workflows every week, or the element around figuring out what is worth exploring versus what's worth waiting out for the next model, and we had said like design has come such a long way, but you still need to know like what you're talking about.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, I think
And so,
for a lot of the models, they kind of get a bad rap for design because I think that you would not give it clear enough instructions, and then the kind of the defaults in the model would output things that always looked very similar. I think there's that classic case of that little
blurb,
thumbnail on Claude,
yeah,
the fingernail on Claude, and things like that, or just like the injecting, italic fonts and something that doesn't need it. There are all these like tells that people would be able to tell. But I think that design has come like this, incredible way. I think especially with the release of Claude design, because you can interact with it like you would interact with, a designer. It can be pretty decent at doing things like creating a design system. And then it can give you an MCP server. Have you tried this in Claude design?
no,
It's really pretty incredible. It's kind of like you're working with a designer in Figma. And so you can
okay,
make different cards. You can come up with like a design system, and then it has this ability to share. One of the ways that you can share with it is it's with a link to an MCP server with a
okay,
prompt. And so you can take that, let's say that you're working on, like some card that, since we were talking about health, this card gives you like a summary card of steps, progress over time, where you are with calories, maybe a little graph for like your macros and where your targets are. So let's say that you design this card and in Claude Design and you want to implement it. What you can do is you can click on the share button, click on the MCP option, take that back over to, Codex or Claude Code or whatever it is that you're using. And you can actually just paste in the MCP, and it does like a pretty decent job just with that. I like getting the radiuses right, getting the padding right, getting the font selections right, the colors, everything like that. But I found a way to go kind of like even one step further. And that is,
how's that?
so what I found is it will still kind of like make mistakes. Sometimes like the fonts will be wrong. And so the more that you can have some sort of reference design system where it is written out in text, like the radius of a button is this color, the primary color of a button is this hex value, secondary button is this hex value, and it is this size and it's that. So if you can translate that design system into text, and then you can feed that into your document. So you can basically say in Claude or Codex, here's the card that we want to implement, here's the MCP. And for the design system, make sure you reference this HTML file, or HTML is actually great for it because you can also show examples, but you could use text as well, where it has kind of those rules. There's like, I think plus and minus to both, because sometimes text is just better. Like the radius of this button is X, works really well. But I found that if you do that and you spend a lot of time, building out that design system where you have all of those rules, you can actually get designs that look very coherent. I'm probably running into my own limitations. I'm sure a designer could still do it like 5x better than I could in AI. But for my own personal stuff, it's really made things look a lot more coherent and better.
Which is super fascinating to hear, because it's like you're taking design principles that you would, use working with a team
Yeah.
and across a number of different departments, and you want to make sure that everyone designs it the same way. So you will have kind of a source of truth, whether it's like a Figma file or, a brand document or something that has everything explicitly written out. And so you're saying it's the same thing when you're
Yeah, it's
dealing
the
with
same thing.
coding agents.
Yeah. I think the next thing that I really want to experiment with is there are a lot of these open source design systems that, like, there's this one, I can't remember what it's, Radix maybe or something like that. But it actually will do like a lot of unstyled components. And so what I want to try to do from there is see what happens when you use those unstyled components, style them in your design system, and then make textual rules for when you use one component over another component.
Mm.
I have kind of like high hopes that that will work. I really hope that it will, but I'll see. I'll let you know if and when I do it and what the results are.
Yeah, please do. I think that a lot of this stuff is still, exploratory, and I think will always be. We're at this stage where I like to quip, that we're like lane space explorers, where we're trying to,
Yeah.
figure out what's even possible. Cause like the people who, are creating these LLMs don't even know. They have to sort of figure out from the market, how the market's adopting to it. And so, a lot of times they're just testing against the benchmark, which isn't real. There's like studying for the test, what you're going to be graded on. But in real world examples, you have to sort of just experiment on your own and see where the edges are. And so that's one of the reasons why I like talking to people like you, hearing what the experiments are, sharing with other people. You publish your stuff on GitHub so other people can access the same tools that you're using and potentially add to them or tweak them for their own use. And so we're living in really awesome times, in my opinion.
Yeah, we really are. It's amazing how fast things change. And what's so funny is it feels exhilarating. You would think that it'd be so exhausting, but for me, I don't know what it is. It just seems so fun to just see everything progress so rapidly and I just scour X. I've got this like AI tab, and I'll go through that every morning and save bookmarks and throw them all into like this window that I have in CMAX for new AI things to check out. So I'll just dump in all those bookmarks, have them saved to the different tools, and use that to evaluate which ones I should be looking into. But it's amazing how fast things change. And the alpha on those is just so large, because sometimes you'll just find somebody who's figured something else out. You're like, wow, that is like a game changer.
Yeah.
It just changes everything.
In terms of your experience, you had mentioned already that you felt just like automating like simple mundane things has been a game changer, but what are some workflows or have you seen other people use that have felt like a game changer for you?
I think there's kind of a tool that enabled a workflow. I'm sure like a lot of people use CMAX, but that was a really big game changer for me. It's just like moving over to that.
Specifically why, for people who are not familiar?
Yeah. So CMAX, for people who aren't familiar, what I was doing is I was just using Claude Code or Codex in just like a default terminal in my Mac. And what CMAX will allow you to do is to organize those windows a lot better. So it's like all in a single app. You have this left-hand column where you've got all of these different panes, and then you can click into any one of those and you can have multiple windows in those. And so I think that was like a really big game changer for me, because what I was able to do is just organize all of my work and keep context open for projects, keep windows open for projects that I work on intermittently. I think just having that organization was really big. And I started kind of organizing my panes. And so I have one pane at the very top that's pinned. And all that is just for planning. And so it's so amazing how the way that you make software without AI, using AI, if you use that same process, it can be like really good. And so what I try to spend almost all of my time doing and interacting with AI is just creating as many detailed plans as I can that will ultimately culminate in a spec. So like a functional spec, a technical spec. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll break that down just like you would on a normal software team into these components or you could call them sprints, you could call them phases, whatever it may be, breaking that down into smaller work, just like you would on a software team, probably keeping changes between, let's say 600 and 1,000 lines in a PR, just like you would with that. And then the other thing that I did is in that process, I created 37 standards documents on how it should be building the software in terms of like style guides, how it needs to be thinking about security, all of the steps in the jobs that you have set up in continuous integration, continuous deployment, all of the different tools that you'd run, the coverage levels that you need for those, how to do a PR, everything is in there. And so one thing that I'll do as well is I'll use those files to audit. So I don't do too much of it up front, except for the continuous integration and continuous deployment. I'll do that like pretty much first thing. And then I'll put just loads of testing in there because that's one thing that I found that AI responds really well to is having that positive feedback loop. And so it can make a lot of changes, 500,000 lines, and then make sure that it didn't break anything by running its own tests, just like you would in a normal software team. And this is like one really incredible thing as well, is there used to always be this trade-off, which is like how much product work do you do, where we're, creating new features and things like that. And then what is like our appetite for technical debt and how do we ride that level so that we don't accumulate so much technical debt that we can't add any more features and it's miserable working. But at the same time, you don't want to spend all of your time, basically just like making sure everything has perfect coverage and security scanning and things like that. And one thing that I love about AI is like that you don't have to make that trade-off anymore. You can like literally do both. And so I think that's like one of the most amazing things is, you don't have to make that feature and kind of like code quality trade-off anymore.
And do you find that you have like these 36 or some on ducks, like,
Yeah.
do you find that it adheres to all of them?
What I've found is like, I think it's too much text to put in the context window at one time. So if you give it like all 37, it will kind of maybe do like 10 of them, 7 to 10 of them. If you do like one at a time, it does really well.
Nice. And so you'll just like stack it in the order that the process you're in at that time.
Yeah. And this is like also another thing that's really good at doing because you can kind of you can create a task, kind of like this meta task for it, which is inspect one file at a time in like a sub agent and come up with a recommendation for, audit the code base, come up with a plan for what we need to do to get the code base to standards. And, that sub agent's going to have its own context window. So it can focus specifically on that like one task at a time. And I found that to work really well. It's just, you probably don't want to spin off all 37 at the same time unless you just want to like blow through all your tokens.
Yeah.
But that works. It works great.
Nice. And then what are some things that you try to do right now that still like LLMs or different like sort of systems aren't there yet?
Gosh, I still have not found a good way. It's so funny because it's like the OG use case of just like writing. It's still just never satisfied with the writing. And I feel like I've tried so many different things and so many different, try to apply different styles to it and never gotten it to come out, never been satisfied with it.
Yeah. Supposedly the new chat or the upcoming ChatGPT models, the version 6 are really good at writing.
Oh, that's great.
So supposedly my assumption we'll see it before the end of the year on that. But yeah, I agree. I'm always like reading it and I'm like, oh, versus when you like read other people's, send you an email that have like, it's just like dripping with AI. And you're like, man,
that's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so easy to clock, especially when you're spending, 12 hours a day talking with it.
I think most people may not, but because we're like talking to them all the time, you're like, it just has that smell.
Yeah. It's like talking to one of your good friends.
Yeah.
All of their little mannerisms.
Exactly. And it makes it difficult. It's like, all right, I just stop reading. If someone's writing an X post and I'm just by the second paragraph in, I'm like, oh, got it. You gave 3 words to Claude and then it spit out the rest.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. And now I think that a lot of those are being watermarked now too.
Yeah. I saw that headline, but we'll just have someone create a watermark removal tool. So, okay. So that doesn't work. And so what do you feel like, talking to your normal friends where you feel like you're living in the future and they'll experience it in a couple years from now? Like, what are some things that they're tired of you saying, or you're just like floored that they don't use every day?
I think what I tell them, they're probably tired of hearing me say that you should use like Claude Code or Codex for different things that they're trying. I think that they did a really great job of rebranding things like Claude Work, Co-work, or I think ChatGPT just did that with work as well. It's in a cloud environment. I think that's going to bring a lot of more people into the system, but I still don't think that they understand the power that you have in just like a terminal. Like that is like a game changer. Being able to control where it writes files, being able to control the context window, which I think is really important. Like not letting right sizing the context window for your task at hand, especially with things like with a 1 million token context window, you can really get yourself into trouble fast with something like that. So yeah, I think learning to use it in the terminal, I think is great. I still, this is probably controversial, but I still do think like the terminal is the best.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And I still use, the Codex interface as well. I'll use that too, but I'm still using terminal for most of my work.
Yeah. I find that the folks who transitioning from an input field where it's a chat conversation with no GUI just feels too heavy for people to keep in their own context window.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Like, wait, how do I use this thing? Like, and I've actually, like, for example, one of the niceties that I'm noticing that there's a whole movement around terminal development. So you have CMUX and then you have, TMUX, CMUX, you have Herder, and then you have the new one that the Ghosty guy is doing.
Was it Mitchell? Mitchell Hashimoto?
Yeah, Mitchell Hashimoto's new company. And so we'll see like new like terminal development, over the next year or so that makes it even easier. But I still think it's still too scary for folks to navigate.
I think you're right.
But I still believe we'll get 10x more users in that field. So who are creating stuff who will use these tools. So I'm not saying that the market is small. I think we'll have an expansion of the market, but getting kind of the mass billion users, making things in a terminal window is not
going to happen. No.
Yeah.
What I think is so crazy, you made me think of something that I saw the stat. We're still only, I think it's like 2.2% of people in the United States have a paid subscription. That is crazy. I mean, just imagine what's going to happen when we go to 5 or we go to 10%. I mean, the world is going to be a different place.
Or the tools that we had paid for 2 years ago become free. Like the current models we're using will become free in 2 years from now.
Yeah. I can see that.
So that to me is where things go, which is there is this 2-year cycle where now we have these open source models where people are optimizing, like, you can run the new DeepSeek for, I don't know, a dollar a day or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Grok build is also like a really good one.
Or Grok or on any of these things. So
It's like
you're not
1/10 the cost.
exactly. So we're paying, $200 for a plan. Most people are going to pay 20, $30, but then the free stuff comes out in 2 years from now. And so, where we will be, who are trying to always be at the like forefront of this stuff, I don't know, but it's definitely exciting stuff. To your point, like I get excited about this stuff. Like, so there's sometimes waves of being overwhelmed because like, you're like, oh my gosh, 10 different new products launched today that they all look amazing, but if you test all of them, you really have no time to do anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have to kind of like stagger it. I like your system of kind of bookmarking it, filtering it, and kind of go through it. Time of this recording, there's the new Grok bot that launched, and I had
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so like testing that out early, and basically for people listening or watching, it allows you to have your own computer. Like your agent has its own computer. You have access to it. You can text it from your phone to your desktop. It's really, really user friendly. And so it kind of allows for people to have an easier onboarding towards like agentic services, like, a Hermes or an OpenClaw, but with the added benefit of your personal cloud computer. And there are people who have tried this stuff. It's still like, I think subscription is something like $150 or $200 a seat right now for that stuff, because you're actually getting a computer.
Seems like a bargain. If you could do something like watch a support queue and answer it.
Yeah. So I think it is from a employee trade-off, right? Like, when people were like, the headlines were like, oh, I've just hired an $800 employee, and people are like, oh, I just bought a Mac Mini, right? And so now you're like, oh, it's $200. And so I think it's from a business perspective, it's a no-brainer for people to experiment with and see how they get in their workflows. It still feels very early days of this agentic internet. And so this is definitely now a new primitive where the Claudes and like chat work, Claude Cowork and chat, they're doing
right.
They give you a sandbox that is tied to your threads, and how they handle it, they don't, you don't know, but it does. It effectively, if you ask it, you're like, what are you running? And it's like, oh, it's running a 16 gigabyte, server somewhere.
Oh, wow.
But with the Grok one, they actually are explicit about it. And they let you remote into that machine too. From your phone.
So you can also
like, if
that's so cool.
Agent gets stuck, you can like tap and click through it. So we're really, it's a new paradigm of people, having these computers in the clouds, where we always like the internet is, a database in the cloud kind of thing. But now we actually have like, virtual machines that you're kind of fully running. So where that goes and is still early in what the experiments people will run, I'm really eager to see.
That's really interesting. It made me, just what you were saying there made me think of something. And I remember when AWS was first coming out, like 2006, 2007. I remember 2007, 2008, it was like really starting to gain steam. And it was such a game changer to move from, if you wanted to build something, you also had to, rent some rack space, buy servers, wire them all up, install things, do all the firewall and security stuff. And then all of a sudden you could just like lay down a credit card and you could, pull up an EC2 instance and be done. It's so cool to be able to use, an agent in the cloud. It also makes me wonder, is there going to be like this ecosystem for agents where they can get access to tools to do different things that they can, more or less pay money for without having to spin things up on their own. So that's really interesting to think about. So kind of like an AWS for agents. Will we see something like that? For example, like let's say that you create like a medical's top of mind, but let's say that you get a Grok bot, and what its job is to do is to just do insurance claims. And so a lot of that is going to be through either like a clearinghouse APIs, or honestly, like some fax is still used so much. An agent may not want to spin up its own asterisk server maintain all the batches for that. It may want to have its own fax line. And I think we saw that was like agent mail.
Yeah.
So agent mail came out. We can give it your own email address, maybe want their own fax line. I've actually given it its own phone number so that it can receive text messages for like MFA stuff for logging in. But yeah, interesting to think about like what kind of ecosystem comes out that is just like software built for agents or utilities built for agents.
Yeah. I think there's a whole list of things where a lot of startups right now, their motto, or even YC, like people, a lot of the YC companies are kind of flipping the old adage of like, make something people want to make something agents want.
Agents want. Yeah,
right?
that makes
And
a lot of sense.
Because that is kind of like the new frontier of like, it's still early now, but in a year or two from now, it will proliferate as everyone has agents or access to agents. And how do you differentiate? How do you sort of provide more tooling and sort of, like you said, you can spin up tokens to build out those things over a course of days, weeks, or you can just pay an API fee, and then you have like Stripe getting into the mix with their protocol, and then there's the Coinbase one to allow for these types of transactions, on-demand transactions to happen. So we're still early in the arc of this stuff, and which is super exciting, and the stuff that I, personally, I'm building in as well. So, anyways, Greg, really, I feel like you can jam on this stuff forever, but I want to be mindful of your time. Where can people find you, your startup, stuff that you're working on?
So mostly X, just Greg Mushin, GREGMUSHEN. Yep.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and look forward to adopting your Hermes agent skills, as well as hearing more about the experiments you're running.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Pleasure speaking. Take care. Bye.